and for your testimony today. You indicate that the board was told that We Charity did not pay speakers. Is that correct?
Yes.
How did they communicate?
Let me be more precise. At We Days.
At We Days. Okay. Were you under the impression that they paid speakers at other events?
Employees spoke at other events, and of course they were compensated, but
speaking fees?
No, I don't believe so.
And so to your knowledge, no one on the board was ever informed that speaking fees would be paid for outside participants to come to We events and give speeches?
At least to We Days, which was the focus of our inquiries, that was my understanding.
So were you surprised to learn that Margaret, Sophie, and Sasha Trudeau received over $300,000 in speaking fees?
I don't know the precise nature of what they were paid for, but if it was exclusively to speak on the We Day stage, that would have surprised me.
And would it have surprised you if it was to speak at any other event related to the We Charity?
I never made inquiries into that kind of an adjunct or associated area, so I just don't know about that particular aspect.
And We Chair and the Kielburgers or We Charity ever expressly communicate to the board that speakers were not paid for We Day events?
They did.
They did. Okay.
Or that may have come from the executive director of the organization, but I know the board made inquiries into that.
Who was that executive director?
It was one of two. I can't be precise on the time. It was either Scott Baker or Dalal El-Wahidi.
Thank you. The Kielburgers justified their mass layoffs in March on the basis of financial trouble they anticipated linked to the coronavirus outbreak. Did I understand you correctly when you described that?
Well, they were certainly seized of issues surrounding the impact from the virus. But I know that the organization was being impacted significantly. For example, schools were closing, We Days had to cease, and the Me to We entity could no longer run trips or have retail operations. So there were significant implications for the organization.
And did the Kielburgers or the management of We tell the board that that's why they were laying off people in March?
Essentially, that was a reduced kind of essence of why people were being laid off, yes.
So the Kielburgers suggested that they were having financial hardship at the time.
I wouldn't characterize it as financial hardship, but that I think they were looking to the future implications of sponsorship, and they were talking to sponsors at the time, but I don't believe they referred to the organization as being in a financial kind of hardship or vulnerable situation.
Is that why you objected to the layoffs?
Well, I objected to the layoffs, not as a matter, kind of a general matter. Perhaps it was necessary. I objected to the fact that they were being done without the full consultation of the board and have detailed information provided to us that would confirm that it was absolutely necessary to proceed in that way. I accepted what they were saying, but we needed to see the information.
Right. Did anyone on the board during your time there ever express any concern about We Charity's payment to other non-arm's length entities like Me to We, any numbered companies, or any other organizations that were contracted or subcontracted by We Charity?
Well, the board of directors of We Charity was quite seized on the issue of looking at transfers between the related entity, particularly of Me to We. We required an annual reconciliation report to the board on those transfers. I think we were interested in getting as much information as we could about those transfers. And in this regard, we always invited the executive director of Me to We to an annual meeting of the We charity to kind of provide us with an update and help us understand the reconciliation of funds as between the two organizations.
Did anyone on the board ever express?
Last question, Pierre.
Did anyone on the board ever express concerns about those transactions between We Charity and Me to We?
I don't think explicit concerns were expressed, rather requests for enhanced information is the way I would put it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Financial ability of We Charity to have delivered the Canada Student Service Grant proposal. So if they continue to have it, was there any reason from a financial perspective that they would not have been able to deliver it?
Well, in the 4 months essentially from yesterday that I've been away from the organization, I think a lot is possible to have changed in terms of the financial standing of the organization, but I do not have those details. Certainly, I did not have immediate questions of the solvency or financial standing of the organization on at the time I left, although I was certainly deeply appreciative of the impact of COVID and its potential impact on the organization from a financial perspective.
So I only have one more question for you. I think, originally our civil servants, they looked at a number of organizations, and in the short period of time that they decided that we had the best abilities, capabilities, things that they were looking for to deliver the Canada Student Service Grant program. Do you have any doubt of the ability of the We Charity to have delivered on the CSSG program?
Well, because of the date of my resignation, I didn't know what the scope of the program was at all. So it's really quite impossible for me to explain whether or not they are able to have delivered on it. I do know that We Charity had at one time certainly many hundreds of employees, but by the time I left, many of those employees were leaving. They had extensive networks both in Canada and the United States, as well as internationally. But insofar as their ability to deliver on that program, I just don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all three. We'll turn to Mr. Fortin, followed by Mr. Angus. Mr. Fortin. You're muted, Rial. Rial, you're muted.
Sorry, I am. Okay. Bonjour.
Good day, Mr. Chairman. Good day, Ms. Douglas. Earlier on, you were saying that you would have been surprised, given that it was not habitual for We Charity to have engaged in the things that we had heard about, that the Trudeau family members were paid. To your knowledge, they were never paid. Is that correct?
I didn't make any inquiries into their specific status, but generally the information told to the board was that no speakers were paid to speak at We Days.
Êtes-vous courant?
Are you aware of the various trips that were offered by We Charity to some politicians, including Mr. Morneau?
I am aware that a number of people traveled to some of the international development locations, the so-called We Village locations, developed by, or supported is a better word, by We Charity. As for the list of people who attended, the board did not get into specifics of every single guest that was attending, whether they were politicians or particularly well-known people. Sometimes we were made aware of it, but not always.
Okay. Êtes-vous au courant que Monsieur...
Are you aware of the fact that Mr. Morneau, his wife, and at least Mr. Morneau and his wife traveled? The sound is cutting out, unfortunately, for the interpreter. We cannot hear what the member is saying.
Mr. Fortin, the interpreter is having it. Maybe try raising your mic a little. The translator is having difficulty picking you up. Try that.
Oui.
There's some technical glitches, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? I will. So, Ms. Douglas, I'll start again. I'm hearing some issues over the line, but are you aware of the fact that the finance minister went to Kenya in 2017 with We Charity, approximately around those dates? Are you aware of that?
I'm not sure if I've understood the interpreter correctly, so perhaps a point for precision, but I was unaware that Minister Morneau went to Africa in 2017.
Donc, je comprends que...
From what I gather, then, Mr. Morneau told us last week that he owed about $43,000 to We Charity for those trips to Ecuador and Kenya. You were not aware of the fact that Mr. Morneau had to reimburse some of these fees to We Charity?
Thank you for that precision, Mr. Fortin. Yes, I was aware that the Minister of Finance made a repayment to We Charity. I don't precisely know what the details would align or correspond to. I don't quite know about that. I'm aware that he personally and members of his family traveled to Ecuador, and possibly I believe that other members of his family traveled to Kenya at some earlier date, but I don't know the details of that.
But you're aware of the fact that he had to refund about $43,000 in travel costs. Are you aware of that?
I did, yes.
Are you aware of whether or not a bill might have been issued to Mr. Morneau for those amounts?
I'm not well positioned as a former member of the board of directors to know about those details. That the executive team would undoubtedly be better placed to address a question like that. I don't know how invoicing systems work.
Okay, mais vous, là, vous étiez quand même président.
You were the chair of the board. The Minister of Finance travels with We Charity. The travel costs are about $100,000. Apparently, he had already paid off $50,000. There was something around an amount of about $43,000 left to be paid. The board, you're telling me that the board was unaware of these significant amounts?
Well, I do know that thousands of people traveled every year to our international development locations and communities with whom we worked closely. But the actual particulars of payments for family members or costs or elements of their trip, that is not a detail. In fact, it's quite the board of directors would see kind of more oversight or aggregate information and not something quite as specific as that. So I don't know what exactly his invoice would have related to. I was aware he went to Ecuador.
Who would be in a position to answer these questions at We Charities, according to you?
I would expect that the executive director of We Charity or Me to We, or perhaps the co-founders could answer that question with precision.
Les cofondateurs, on comprend, c'est monsieur.
Co-founders are the Kielburger brothers. But who is the executive director you're referring to?
The executive director I'm referring to is Ms. Dalal El-Wahidi, the executive director of We Charity. The executive director of Me to We is Mr. Russ McLeod.